And
Just close. Just close.
okay. Hello, people out there in Zoom land. This is the Stories of RiverCon panel. I'm Joel Zockham. I'm your moderator. Was a semi-relative newcomer to RiverCon. I did not attend any RiverCons until RiverCon 5 in 1980, but made it to every one since. I was also at the 1979 North American, which, regardless of what some people will tell you, was not a RiverCon. But I'm a relative youngster because the rest of the panelists had either been at every RiverCon, all 25, or was the fan guest of honor at the first and the 20th RiverCon. So I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves, starting, since it's on my left on this, with Bob Rame.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm Bob Rame. I was one of the founding members of the RiverCon committee back whenever we came up with this idea, 1974, or maybe even a little before that. I was listed as vice chairman for many of them, but the titles kind of varied over the years, depending on what I felt like when I put the program book together. Also, I did all the program books, all the flyers, many other jobs throughout. Steve and Sue know. Many of them I sat in the registration room printing badges and the daily newsletter. But anyway, that's enough about me. Let's move on. Maybe to what, Joel?
Juanita?
Yes, I know the screen says Emily, but I'm Juanita
Colson.
She married my son, who was also at every RiverCon. I said, okay, and we figured I don't met Steve and Sue and so forth. We huckstered. We also did Filk, and I think I'd written a little bit by then, and then Buck had, with his friend Gene DeWeese, written some Man from U.N.C.L.E. novels. And sure, it's a con in Louisville. Why not? We can get there. Can we have a huckster table? And we had a real ball and appreciated what they're doing and said, are you going to do it again? And they said, well, this was Deep South Con. We're not sure if we're going to do Deep South Con again. And we encouraged them, please, please do this again. We really enjoyed ourselves. So it's all their fault, all Bob's and Steve and Sue.
Not mine. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't there at the first one, but well, Steve and Sue chaired the last 18 or so RiverCons, and they're all fan guests of honor, of course, at this convention. So say a little thing, something about yourself. We're not hearing you.
Me?
No, Sue.
No, we're not hearing Sue.
Yes. I don't think they're hearing you, possibly.
Did they get muted again?
No, it says I'm not muted.
Well, I can hear you faintly.
Yeah, here.
I'll speak louder. Anyway, can you hear me now?
Faintly. You might have to get closer.
Okay. Loud. Anyway, Cliff Amos was the chairman of the very first, I think, 7, maybe 8 RiverCons. And then he stepped aside and Steve and I co-chaired from then on.
Well, Bob,
yeah, we should.
Are you wearing earbuds?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the earbud mic is not picking them up. You might want to try without the earbuds and just use the mic on the tablet.
Okay, I pulled the earbud out.
Good.
Oh,
sounds much better.
Is that better?
much better.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
It's just
well,
that we have a harder time hearing you, but that's okay.
everybody speak up as loud as you can comfortably, because ours is not a strong speaker.
And we're also very old.
That's true.
Am I?
Well, that'd be easy for Juanita.
Oh, Sue,
He's
you
got a
were
nice,
talking
loud
about
voice.
Cliff.
What I was saying about Cliff was that he was chairman for the first 7 or 8 RiverCons. I'm not sure exactly how many. And then when he decided to step aside, then Steve and I took over as co-chair, and Bob stayed there as well. And as Bob said before, he did all the flyers, all the program books, a lot of the badges, till we decided to do it on the computer as we were registering, which I'm still not sure that was a good idea, but we tried. And but we didn't keep our registration online. We kept our little 3x5 cards all the way through RiverCon.
And they never showed a blue screen once.
Yeah, we need to, excuse me.
Well, when Cliff stepped aside, we went to Bob and said, Bob, you're the vice chairman. Now you would next in line to be chair if you chose to that. Sue was registration, I was treasurer. And Bob said, no way. So he decided, okay, nobody else wants it, we'll go ahead and do it. So we
I
did it
much
for the next
prefer-
18 years.
I much preferred to stay behind the scenes, behind the desk, behind the computer.
Was RiverCon the first science fiction convention in Kentucky?
No, I think it was.
Good.
I
I
don't,
didn't know
we-
a thing.
I've been going since the 50s and I don't remember any other one.
And-
Only other one in Kentucky that I remember
Yeah.
might have been a PhilCon, and that hardly counts. That'd be too tiny to.
Wouldn't have been anything, Lexington or Concave didn't start until
No,
later.
not that I remember. We would have been huckstering there if we could, so.
Well,
Lexington Concave started later.
yeah, well, we broke ground
Concave
there
was
then
never
too.
Lexington.
No, well, the only
no.
one in Lexington was RubiCon, which was much later. And
Yes. And
is it true that
Concave didn't
the,
start in Kentucky until
1980.
1980.
so,
And Cliff had a little something with that too.
so is it true that the original RiverCon was planned near a dumpster in the infield for the Kentucky Derby?
Well,
Steve, I don't know,
Sort of.
Is that a story? Do you know
That's
that
the way
story?
legend goes.
As I said, I'm not sure it's true or not, or it is just a legend, because I cannot remember being there. But a bunch of us did go to the Derby in spring of '74.
It's all right.
And Cliff probably said, let's put on a convention. So, the dumpster part, well, my guess is that Very probably was standing on top of the dumpster, and that's where that part came in.
Well, I remember Buck and I both went up and said, you know, this is great convention. You've done a great job. And they said, well, they were laughing at us because we were supposed to be the Deep South Con. And the other one said, what do you mean Deep South, Louisville? And we were going to show them. And I said, you sure did.
The northernmost Deep South Con ever, probably.
As far as I know,
I think RiverCon was the first most northern.
yeah, there were a couple other later Deep South cons in Louisville, but they were not RiverCons.
No.
They were independent. Okay. One of the unique things about RiverCon is that you decided to end the convention while it was still successful. Steve and Sue, you want to address why you did that?
Well, out of the committee that had been looking for years and years and years were starting to get tired, and they were saying, you know, we don't want to do this forever and ever. And we thought, well, if we're not going to, we didn't want to break in a new, you know, committee. And we were getting kind of tired too. And so we thought, well, the 25th is coming up, so let's stop it there. But we announced it 2 years out that we were going to retire RiverCon.
Go out in a
25
blaze of
years is-
glory. You sure did.
I'm sorry.
You went out in a blaze of glory.
I would agree with that. That last one was quite spectacular.
Yeah, tell me about it. For the last RiverCon, I was running programming, which I'd done at like the last, I either ran or co-ran programming at like the last 7 or 8 RiverCons. And this time, they invited all the past guests to return, and a great number of them came in. And I had to put together, well, I was used to doing a 2 or 3 track programming. I think I had to put together a 6-track program just to get everybody who wanted to be on the program on.
Well, let me add, Steve has always been, he's always been the treasurer, even when he was co-chair, and is a whiz with numbers. And by that time, we had been successful enough that we had accumulated a bit of a nest egg. And so he went through, did all the calculations, and figured we could afford to invite back, 20, 40 past guests and pay most of their expenses to come to the last one. And it worked out. So Steve, you want to say something about that?
Are they hearing?
I don't know.
Well, as it turned out, we got about half of our original guests back. There was a big storm on the East Coast, and any of our East Coast guests were not able to get out because of the storm. A lot of planes were grounded, and nobody was driving because it was so bad. But we ended up with a total 1,276 people at the convention, which was about double our normal population.
So we have a question from the chat room, which I can't answer because I was not in Louisville until 1983. The question is, how active was Louisville before?
Oh, well,
Well, there was a.
I can
Go ahead,
I can
Bob.
answer that. I can start that out. Louisville fandom had its origins in about 1968 or 9 with Cliff Amos. He founded at the University of Louisville a science fiction class. This was the 60s, and so the quote unquote free university was a big thing then, where anybody could say, I want to teach a class on this or that subject. And so Cliff said, I want to do one on science fiction. So he started that class, and out of that developed the club FOSFA, Falls of the Ohio Science Fiction Association. And then Steve was there in early years as well. And a few other people who stayed with us through the decades. So that's how it started. So Louisville fandom really started in 69, give or take, quite a few years before RiverCon.
Well, I don't know whether you know it or not, but the very first RiverCon was responsible for a fiasco con in Indianapolis. A young fan from Indiana went there, and he said, "Oh, this is easy." And I said, "You haven't seen all the work that's gone in to make all these wheels invisible." And he said, "No, there's nothing to it. I will put on a Star Trek con in Indy and invite all the stars, and we'll have a big show." that sort of tanked when we arrived with our huckster stuff, and there was a little newbie sitting at the table and said, "Oh, here are your programs." So we said, "Where are badges?" And she said, "What are badges?" And that was the high point of the convention. So
I was expecting Steve to jump in there and say, we don't need no stinking badges.
I know.
You missed your cue, Steve. Well, somebody tried to put on a Star Trek convention in Louisville 2 or 3 years later.
I think
And
everybody
lost-
already knows that line.
And I mean, they lost their shirts as well because they paid DeForest Kelly an awfully lot of money.
We'll see what an inspiration and decimator you are. So the innocent have been lured.
Can I mention something that's not the general rule with conventions these days is that everything was all volunteer. The policy from the very first RiverCon was that we, the committee, always paid for our own memberships. Here's my $10, you know, so we always had a stake in this. Guests were not paid extra. They got all their travel, rooms, and honorariums, but they never got a fee on top of all of that. Fandom was just a big
Party.
volunteer amateur. I mean, a lot of them aren't that way anymore.
Well, back in the 50s, Robert Bloch suggested we should turn everything over to professionals and it would run better. And we said, but that wouldn't be as much fun. And
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been. It would have been merchandise. And I'm sorry, we were hucksters, but no, that's not why we went.
Robert Bloch was one of the best guests we ever had,
I
I
know.
must add.
But he sometimes may have made a bad suggestion occasionally.
Oh, it's that Hollywood influence, I guess.
So since you mentioned it, Bob, who were some of your favorite RiverCon guests?
Well, as I mentioned, Bloch, the early years, I mean, we had really a stellar guest list from the very beginning. There was no question that Philip Jose Farmer was going to be the first guest of the River World Connection. And he and his wife, Betty, who is absolutely delightful. Roger Zelazny, George R.R. Martin was in it somewhere, you know, before he became a megastar. I've got books here. When Farmer came back for the 20th one too, the DeCamps, Al Sprague and Catherine DeCamp, who never went out, never made a step out of their room unless they were formally dressed.
Oh no, Mr. DeCamp, sir. I love Mr. DeCamp, sir.
Exactly. Yes, they dressed for a formal banquet, no matter what.
Was that the con of Laumer?
No, he never came to a RiverCon. He was a Kubla Khan. Yeah,
Right.
that's another story.
Yes.
Well, wait a minute, Steve. Maybe Laumer was at a RiverCon.
The one with Ali's wedding.
Oh, at the Stofers. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of RiverCon fans got to meet Muhammad Ali that year.
Well, they also got to watch an interesting performance at the banquet when a certain gentleman came in, loaded up his plate, sat down, eat before any of the ceremony had started, and walked out. And later on had an encounter with Ali with Kelly Freeze standing by. You presumably know about that one. Ali was there and Mr. Laumer was in a really bad mood, and the elevator arrived and he said, "Out of my way, boy," and got on the elevator. And the doors closed and he looked at Kelly. "There's nothing wrong with you, is there?" And Kelly said, "I just met him outside, you know, I don't know him." It was an adventure because there was that big wedding going on in the hotel at the same time, and Ali was a guest. And that may have been the first one. I believe it was.
No, that would have been, I'm thinking the third one, second or third.
Okay.
In Lawmer's defense, if you can say such a thing, is that he had had a stroke
Yes,
and
I know, but
drastically
everybody
changed
was
his behavior.
very laid back about the whole
Mm.
whatever.
But Kelly was another one of our favorite guests too.
Oh
He
yeah.
did a couple covers for us.
And Filks were good too.
Oh,
You know, that's not your purview, but
When did the riverboat ride start? Was that with North Americon or did you?
When Muhammad Ali was there, he also met Meade Ferguson, and Meade Ferguson, his son, was messing around with Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali posed for a picture with him, and had his youngest son punching him in the face. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I don't know. Did we do the Belle of Louisville riverboat from the first one? I kind of think we did.
No,
No.
I think that was
we did start at the riverboat at the first one.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, Steve, we did. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, we had to haul people down to the wharf area from the hotel, which was on Broadway at the time. And that a lot of trips back and forth to people down there. Fortunately, not everybody wanted to go.
So the big one though was at 79, the NASFiC there when we were at the Galt House, right on the wharf.
That's one where you told the Filkers, if you entertain on the stage, you can have a free ticket. And we didn't know the stage was over the boiler. But we did our best. It's also my incident with the riverboat's whistle, because we were actually given mics and none of us had ever used them before. And somebody had requested me to do a Heinlein song, and this noise started, and I didn't know what to do except lean in closer to the mic and drown it out, which I'm told I sort of did. But in the meantime, out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching one of our fellow singers fall off a chair while he's already wearing a cast on his broken leg and laughing. And I didn't know what they were laughing at until much later. So it was a very memorable convention.
Well, we continued the riverboat rides up all the time we were in downtown. And then when we moved out to the Executive West, I'm not sure, we might have tried 1 year with a bus, but that was just not workable anymore.
No, I only remember the one down at the Galt House, close to the Galt House.
So I'm sure Joel's got more questions he wants to throw in here.
Well, we have another question from the Peanut Gallery.
Can't hear Joel.
I said we have another question from the Peanut Gallery.
It's completely
And I
muted.
think I know who it's from because it says, how did you choose all of your wonderful guests of honor like Debbie Hughes, who is here on Discord? So that's a question from one of our past stars of honor, Debbie Hughes.
How do we choose our artists?
All of our guests. It was always a kind of a consensus. We would, after a RiverCon was over, we would have a meeting and we would all sit around and say, well, who can we have next year? And everybody would throw out names and we would come to a decision. For Debbie, that was an interesting one. She was artist guest once by herself, but then there was that 4 collaborative artists 1 year too. That was a interesting one.
That's one I would like to provide an explanation for the RiverCon 20 program book. We were trying to decide who the artists who to use as the artist for the program book cover. And because I have an extreme lack of knowledge about Tennessee geography, I figured, well, we have 4 artists who've done program book covers who all live in Tennessee, and perhaps they can do a collaboration, thinking that
He's in.
Nashville and Memphis are probably real close to each
Debbie
other.
Hughes, Maxwell, Clark, and Ward.
And they're not, but we had a wonderful cover from Alan Clark, Kevin Ward, Mark Maxwell, and Debbie Hughes in collaboration.
I don't know how clear this is, but this
And
is that
Debbie
cover.
Hughes.
Oh, yes, it is.
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure how they did it.
I think
Artistic
using
tricks.
the US Post, someone would do part and then mail it off to the other people.
But we had Vincent DeFate did a cover for us. Larry Elmore, Kelly Freeze, Paul Lair actually did 2 memorable covers. Just so many others.
Okay,
And-
someone
and-
said me because I've gotten a message that that people are having difficulty hearing me.
Yes,
Yes.
just
Yes.
volume.
Oh,
Okay.
I can hear you just fine.
Well, we couldn't, so through a glass darkly.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, it turned on. I keep trying, I'm used to working on a tablet, so I keep trying to press things on my computer, which of course doesn't do anything without using the trackpad. We
This
have
is
a,
new.
okay, go ahead, Bob.
No, I just say this is new to many of us.
Yes, this is the first convention I've attended this way.
And we
So-
hope it's the last.
So since the
Now,
panel,
if anybody is interested, I'm not here, the first ad
Show the camera.
ever shown for RiverCon.
You're gotta get closer. It's gonna be back.
The reversed,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
that was made in Discon 2 program book in 1974.
and
It was sports, but that's okay.
Now, if they could still,
not doing,
And
not
up
having
until,
anything to, okay, not
No,
having
no.
anything to do with RiverCon, but behind me is a poster that Richard Powers did for Discon 2.
It's
and
power.
Yes.
we can barely see behind Steve and Sue some of the original program book artwork too, because they have most of it very nicely
have-
displayed.
You did one
We have the
wonderful job.
First and
on the program.
second and third. We,
there's 2, we have 2 missing.
of all 25, there's 2 of them we do not have.
At least
One
2
of
of
them,
them,
Cliff Amos, and we think it burned. 2
but at
pro
least
book
2 of
covers.
them, 2 of the covers did not have did not have printed, where they weren't on paper, I'll put it that way. Rick Leader's cover was a very early all digital work. And then another year, it was a photograph of the Horsehead Nebula with, I think, Kelly Free's riverboat drawing kind of superimposed over it. So there are no originals that exist for those 2.
Okay, well, the title of this panel is Stories of RiverCon. So Steve or Sue, do you want to tell the audience one of your favorite
Okay.
RiverCon stories?
Steve did that. Well, I'll tell a kind of a funny RiverCon story, and I'm not sure it was RiverCon 2 or 3, but I was doing registration, and we were doing it up on the top floor. Oh, Bob already remembers this one.
Yes, I know where you're going with
Nope,
this one.
well, okay, anyway, as I was registering people, I had a long line of people waiting to be registered, and the fire alarm off. And I asked somebody to go find out it was a real alarm, it was just a phony alarm, and nobody moved. I said, okay, well, I'm sitting here, I'm not gonna get any more, take any more members until somebody goes and finds out if this is a real alarm or not, because if it's real, I want to leave here. And so they finally decided it was not real, it was a fake alarm, and so I went on taking memberships, but for a while I was a little uncomfortable.
One of the reasons that we started RiverCon was a number of us went to Ken Moore's Con, Nashville, and enjoyed it a lot. So we think we could do this too. So we set up and we're doing it. And as Sue was taking registrations, she's getting a lot. We had 545 that first year. And Ken came up several times to Sue and says, well, how many have you got now? And he said, oh man, that's a lot. And then a little later on, he came up and said, it's getting ridiculous. Of course, his language is a little more colorful than that. Finally, he showed when we were getting close to the end, and he said, that's more people than we got at KublaCon for the first 2 years combined. So I guess we did okay that first time around at 545.
We were concerned, and that's why we had a comic book component. You know, we had a couple of Dave Cochran and Mike Kaluta, if memory serves, just to bring in some more fans. And we decided we didn't really need to kind of dilute what we were trying to do at that point. But yeah,
those were the people that Don Rosa wanted to bring in.
Uh-huh.
Bob,
Don Rosa.
since you're on, do you want to tell a fun story?
No. I would like to say something about Mike Resnick, though. As program book editor, Mike was just always ready to help out and do anything asked of him. I think he attended probably every RiverCon, certainly almost all of them, and more than a couple times as a named guest, he and Carol. But Mike wrote 4 or 5 at least program book biographies on request for various people, always coming back in the next day's mail. And then when email became a thing, I would send him an email and ask, can you send me 500 words about so-and-so? Within the hour, there it would be in my inbox. Mike was one of the most wonderful people in the history of RiverCon, really.
Well, you know how to edit too. You asked me for, I think it was Barry and Sally or Fick West or something. You said, could you send me? And I said, how many words? And you said, oh, about 250. Okay, I was a writer. I did word count. So you got about 262. And you later said, well, thank you, because you got one other one that was 2 pages long. Small print, and it took up more space than you were planning on your layout, and mine fit just where you wanted it to. So some of them you have to scramble with. So
can I tell a story? I'm
No,
sorry,
you
I feel
already
like
refused.
I'm talking too much, because so it was the year that Julia Swartz was our fan guest, and so I asked Frederick Pohl who knew him back in the 1930s, to write a short tribute to him. Well, time passed and it didn't show up, and I was getting really nervous. So literally, like the day before the program book had to go to press, I sat down and wrote an essay myself for the program book. And I read it just the other day, and I'll tell you, it wasn't bad. But the letter from Pole arrived at my house on either the Friday or the Saturday during RiverCon. He had hopelessly mangled my address. Just every word was wrong. I was living on an Edgeland Avenue. He called it Edgewood Lane or some such. Only the zip code was correct, so it eventually got to me. But it was early enough so we could print it in the daily newsletter after all.
The newsletter was a great idea, by the way. So many cons picked up later on that idea.
So Juanita, do you have any RiverCon stories?
Well,
Other-
besides
other-
the riverboat one, there were several things associated with that. One of them was, I think, for the first time, a huckster had laser pens with the red dot, and the riverboat, when it was cruising at night, was being harassed by a speedboat. These guys were zipping in and out on both sides and running ahead and then coming back, etc. And there were a lot of fans on the upper deck with these brand new laser guns that they had bought at the huckster's room earlier that day. And they started tracing them along the water line of the speedboat. And from where we were on the main deck, stepping out to get a little fresh air, we could see people leaning over the side of the speedboat and feeling at the water line, trying to see what the damage was. And the speedboat peeled away and never bothered us again on that particular cruise. Whether they made a habit of doing this every year, I do not know, but that year they went away. Hopefully to put their boat in dry dock.
Well, one of my all-time favorite convention stories occurred at RiverCon 10. The guest of honor was George R.R. Martin, who was at that time a rising author well before Game of Thrones. Postmaster was a short, hairy Canadian fan by the name of Mike Lixon,
Oh,
who
yeah.
was a good friend of George's. Sometime before the kitchen, Mike was sent a copy of an early of Fantastic Four, which had a letter of comment in it from a 13 or 14-year-old George Martin. At the banquet, I don't banquet or just the guest of honor presentation that year, when introducing George, Mike took out the comic book and started reading the letter verbatim, which, among other things, I think compared Stan Lee to William Shakespeare.
Oh.
By the time
And would
He
have
was
agreed.
he was done, George had literally left his chair and crawled underneath the table.
Right. Don't remind us of our childhood errors.
Was it I forget whether maybe it was the first RiverCon, because Andy Offit was speaking at the banquet. If it was, then he was introducing Philip Jose Farmer. And Lou Tabaco, who was in the room, got up and started to walk out. Well, Andy, who was a little touchy about such things, stopped speaking and said, "Where are you going?" And Lou says, "I'm just going to the bathroom. I'm old."
Nature.
Oh, Andy was another mainstay of RiverCon. He just was there again almost every year, and was again, he and Jody were guests numerous times, and always did anything that we wanted them to do.
Oh, yes, he became a mainstay of other conventions too, when
During
somebody else didn't show or,
Yeah, 70s and 80s, Andy Offit was everywhere.
the man has wheels. Sure, I'll come, etc.
So we have another question from the audience, which came in before, but I've been hesitating to ask, but
Uh-oh.
why not? Someone wanted to know what was the con's relationship with the hostility suite.
Not my view.
I'll let Steve answer that one.
They were just a bunch of ratty kids that basically wanted to try to get freebies. So one year they actually counterfeit badges, and we caught them at. And finally, after about 3 years later, a couple of them actually came up to us and apologized for them being such jerks they were. They realized, you know, we were doing a lot of work and putting on a convention for them and everybody else. And they decided that they were wrong and they apologized for what they'd done 3 or 4 years before. One of the things that they did that probably contributed to the end of stay at the golf house, they put up a sign in their window which faced out to the golf house on the other side of the street with a big 4-letter word on it. And the hotel, of course, did not take kindly to that at all. And there were a number of other little incidences that they pulled that the hotel did not appreciate very well. But like I said, 3 years later, the ringleaders came up and apologized for what they had done. And from then on, we had no more further problems with them.
I think the kind of the game of trying to counterfeit badges was just that. It was a game. And so every year we would try to come up with some method that would make it harder. We would get special papers, hologram stickers, things like that. So it was a little bit of back and forth there, I think. That wasn't as funny at the time.
It never is. You always say,
It
someday
worked for about
we'll
a
look
year
back
and then
at this
it
and laugh.
It
would
would, you know,
change again.
it wouldn't have made that much difference in actually a dozen or so people sneaking in. Where'd Joel go?
Hey, where did he go?
We have been abandoned by our
A question popped up and they know why we had,
Hello. We're here.
one of the questions that popped up said that,
You seem to have lost Joel.
one question's popped up.
I think we still had about 10.
Joel List,
Well, then somebody else talk. Steve, you say something. Give us a benefit
Well,
of your vast years
one of
of
the questions
wisdom.
that came on was that they asked
There he
if,
is. There he is. He's back.
they asked about our art shows.
We had wonderful people running the art shows over the years. Lynn Harris, Donna Amos, you know, and I think we had a very good art show, very well curated.
Well,
Oh.
Bijo, yeah, Bijo
Not-
started the art shows in 60. And you kept it running beautifully.
I don't have a sample of it, but this is I wanted to show this too.
Oh, yes.
This is a blown glass Pegasus that each guest received. I don't know exactly when we started that, but there was a similar one for the Masquerade, a Ming of the Ming Award. But this was a leftover one.
That was at North American, I believe.
But this is, I wish you could see the detail on this. It's really beautiful.
Well,
Yeah.
I was cut off again, so hopefully you carried on without me. We've got about 5 minutes left. Anybody want to say something to close us out?
I wish you were still going.
I've heard that a lot.
I think
I know.
Steve or Sue was right earlier that after 25 years, we were just getting a little tired.
Well, you've
And
been-
we were still having so much fun, but we knew eventually it wouldn't be fun anymore.
But your attendees were having a lot of fun.
And
I
And
think
I
running,
remember- I can't really think of a convention like RiverCon, which sort of managed to blend the Southern Con and the Midwest Con as well. It was not a relaxicon, but there were a lot of parties, certainly a lot of relaxing. I think there was good programming, not even in the years where I wasn't running it.
Good masquerades too.
Good masquerades, very good dealers room. We've been asked to come to Discord room afterwards for chat. I've always had problems with getting into the Discord room. They don't like the security on Apple products.
well,
So
I don't have Discord, so if I need to do that, then I can't join that either.
Yeah.
I feel we've probably forgot to mention some really important stuff, but 50 minutes is all we got.
Is there
there's
any people we need to mention who we didn't? I'm DJ Willinger, who emceed all our masquerades.
Yeah.
Linda Wyatt, who was running the masquerades, was doing it.
Shelby Bush, who worked a lot of the middle years. I mentioned Lynn Harris a little while ago, and Stephen Sue's brood, Cheryl and all of her brothers and sisters eventually got roped into, even grandchildren toward the end got roped into helping in one way or another. And the Gophers, the t-shirts, I think,
We
were
had Cheryl run
legendary.
registration.
Yeah,
And Laura.
I think
Laura.
I've got the last RiverCon program book and looking at the registration staff, and except for, and I'm not sure, I may be wrong, except for somebody by the name of Gloria Nugent Edwards, I'm thinking everybody on the registration staff was related to Stephen Sue. It was Laura Gill, Teddy Lawn, Melissa Dick, David Francis, Paul Francis, Sue Francis, Paul Gill, and Rick Lawn.
You're right.
They work cheap.
That's true.
We
And
can
they were
close out.
kid had to, right?
Yeah. Well, we close out by really giving a big thanks to Steve and Sue for all their work over the years too. And you deserve your fan guest of honorships here today.
1 minute to
We
go.
have 1 minute to go. So I'm going to show you the first RiverCon program book. I think everybody should find amusing. It's the Bella Lewis on hydrofoils.
Rosa.
Don Rosa.
I'm sure Juanita will remember that.
Oh, yes.
And this is Paul
And that
Laird.
was done by Doza.
And this is Paul Layers of the last RiverCon program book.
There it is again.
It's a great
Ah.
guest.
And this is one of those beautiful ones, the one that Kelly Freeze did for RiverCon 2.
If we've got 30 seconds more, I'll mention that Paul Lair cover on the 25th one was actually a preliminary sketch that he did as an alternative for the earlier one that he did. But it was so good. We used it for the last one. He had passed away by then. So
Well-
that seemed appropriate.
The chat is very lively according to the message I've gotten. So that was good. I hope people enjoyed it. Old conventions are never die. They just fade away, and hopefully they won't be forgotten.
I think we all had fun.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people watched.
I think we're going over, so I think we need probably end
I
this.
thought we'd already
Hold our
stopped.
tent, steal away.
Well,
Okay, so can
nice seeing you,
someone,
Juanita.
good seeing everybody, and so can someone, you can either press the leave button, hopefully other people's, some of the